The gymnasium lights flickered against the polished hardwood floor, casting long shadows across decades of memories preserved in trophy cases and faded banners. My name is Nick Mandrell, and 20 years ago I walked across this same floor to receive my diploma, convinced the world was waiting for me with open arms. Tonight, standing in the doorway of my high school reunion, I realized the world had other plans. The decorations committee had gone all out, transforming the space into some nostalgic fever dream of our senior year, complete with blown-up yearbook photos and a playlist that could have been ripped straight from my old CD collection. I spotted my own photo near the refreshment table, all buzz-cut and earnest eyes, wearing the confident smile of someone who had no idea what was coming. The conversations died the moment I stepped inside, not all at once, but in a wave, spreading outward from the entrance like ripples in still water. Heads turned, whispers started, and there, holding court near the center of the room in a designer dress that probably cost more than my truck, stood Jessica Hartwell, my ex-girlfriend. The woman who had once promised me forever and then defined exactly how long forever actually lasted. She saw me at the same moment I saw her, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or perhaps it was satisfaction at seeing what I had become versus what she had become. Her new husband, a real estate developer named Bradley something, stood beside her with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to networking events and country club functions. Jessica recovered quickly, her expression shifting into that familiar mix of pity and amusement I remembered so well from our final conversation. "Well, well," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Nick Mandrell, I heard you were back in town, still working at that garage, I assume." The laughter that followed was polite but pointed. I felt the familiar heat rising to my face, the old instinct to shrink, to apologize for existing, to make myself smaller so others could feel bigger. But I had learned a long time ago that some battles require you to stand your ground even when every instinct screams retreat. "Still fixing things that other people break," I replied evenly. "It is honest work." Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Her husband leaned in, whispering something that made her laugh, a sharp sound that echoed off the gymnasium walls. Around them, former classmates watched with the hungry attention of spectators at a gladiator match. What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone in that room who had already decided they knew my story. If you have ever felt like the underdog, like the person everyone has already written off, then you understand what it means to carry invisible weight. Hit that subscribe button and stay until the end, because this story is about what happens when the masks finally come off. My daughter Mia was 7 years old, and she was the only reason I had agreed to come tonight in the first place. She had found the invitation in the mail 2 weeks ago, studying it with those serious brown eyes she inherited from her mother. "Daddy, what is a reunion?" she had asked, and I had tried to explain it in terms a child could understand. "It is when people who used to know each other get together to see how everyone turned out. Are you going to go?" I had hesitated, thinking of all the reasons to stay home. The whispers, the comparisons, the inevitable questions about what had happened to the boy most likely to succeed. But Mia had looked up at me with complete faith, the kind only children possess, and said, "You should go, Daddy. Maybe you will make new friends." So here I was, making new friends. Mia was staying with my mother tonight, probably already asleep with her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm and her notebook of drawings on the nightstand. She documented everything in that notebook, from the birds that visited our backyard feeder to the customers who came into the garage with their broken-down cars. She was going to be an artist someday, or maybe an engineer, probably both. She had her mother's creativity and my stubborn refusal to quit, her mother, Rachel. Even now, 3 years later, the name sent a sharp ache through my chest. We had met during my second deployment when she was working as a trauma nurse at the military hospital in Germany. She had seen me at my worst, broken in ways that did not show on any X-ray, and she had loved me anyway. We had 7 years together before the cancer took her. 7 years of building a life, raising a daughter, learning what it meant to be present after spending so long trained to survive. The medical bills had taken everything else. The house we had saved for, the college fund we had started, the future we had planned. By the end, I was working double shifts at the garage just to keep up with the payments, and after she died, I moved back to my hometown with Mia because it was the only place I could afford to start over. My mother helped with childcare. The garage owner gave me flexible hours, and slowly, painfully, we rebuilt. Not the life I had imagined, but a life nonetheless. Jessica did not know any of this, of course. To her, I was still the boy she had dumped senior year when she realized my plans involved enlisting rather than accepting the business scholarship her father had helped arrange. "You are throwing your life away," she had said. "I am not going to wait around for someone who would rather play soldier than build something real." She had married Bradley within a year of graduation. I had shipped out to boot camp 3 months later. 12 years of service, including 2 combat deployments with Marine Force Recon. The things I had seen, the things I had done, the brothers I had lost. None of it showed on my resume when I applied for the mechanic job. None of it came up when people asked what I had been doing all these years. Some stories are too heavy to share with strangers, and some scars run too deep for casual conversation. The gymnasium was filling up now, clusters of former classmates reconnecting with varying degrees of enthusiasm. I recognized faces but struggled with names, the years having blurred the details of people I had known only superficially even then. I had been a quiet kid, focused on sports and academics, more comfortable in the shop class than at parties. Jessica had been the exception, the popular girl who had inexplicably chosen me, and when she unchose me, it had confirmed everything I secretly believed about my own worth. The military had beaten that out of me. You cannot survive force recon training while doubting yourself. You cannot lead men in combat while questioning your right to exist. Somewhere between the crucible and the battlefield, I had found the core of who I was, stripped of pretense and approval-seeking. But standing in this gymnasium surrounded by people who remembered only the boy I used to be, I felt those old doubts creeping back. "Nick Mandrell," a voice called out, and I turned to see a heavy-set man approaching with a genuine smile. It took me a moment to place him. Derek Hollis, who had sat behind me in calculus and borrowed my notes before every test. "Man, it is good to see you. I heard you were back." He shook my hand with real warmth, and I felt some of the tension ease from my shoulders. "Derek," I said, "you look good. How have you been?" We talked for a few minutes, catching up on the broad strokes of 2 decades. He had gone into accounting, married his college sweetheart, had 3 kids now. He asked about me, and I gave him the abbreviated version. Military service, wife passed away, raising my daughter now, working at the garage. He nodded with the respectful silence of someone who understood that some stories have weight. "I heard about Rachel," he said quietly. "I am sorry, man. She was good people. You knew her. Met her once, at your mother's birthday party a few years back. Before. He cleared his throat. "How is your little girl doing?" "She is amazing," I said, and I meant it. Toughest kid I know. Derek smiled. "Gets it from her dad, I bet." Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. I looked up to see a group of men in expensive suits making their way into the gymnasium, and at their center a face I recognized from the news but never expected to see in person. Alexander Whitmore, the tech billionaire whose company had just landed a massive defense contract. He was several years older than our class, but his younger sister had graduated with us, and apparently he had tagged along as her +1, or maybe he had his own reasons for being here. The room's energy shifted immediately, conversations dying as people turned to stare. Even Jessica, who had been holding court with practiced ease, seemed momentarily thrown by the arrival of someone whose net worth dwarfed her husband's by several orders of magnitude. Whitmore moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries while his security team maintained a discreet perimeter. I turned back to Derek, but he was already drifting toward the growing cluster around the billionaire, drawn by the gravitational pull of wealth and influence. I understood. In a town like this, proximity to power was its own currency. I stayed where I was, nursing my drink and watching the social dynamics play out. Some things never changed. The popular kids still clustered together, still measured worth by external markers, still performed their status for each other like birds displaying plumage. And I was still on the outside, still the quiet kid who never quite fit. But I was no longer the boy who needed their approval. That boy had died somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, replaced by someone harder, someone who had learned that real worth is measured in actions, not appearances. Jessica made her move about 10 minutes later, threading through the crowd toward Whitmore with Bradley in tow. I watched her work, admiring the skill even as I recognized the calculation. She had always been brilliant at reading rooms and positioning herself. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her in high school. Before I understood the difference between intelligence and wisdom, she managed to get close enough to introduce herself, and I saw Whitmore nod politely, the practiced smile of someone who dealt with ambitious people every day. His sister, a woman I vaguely remembered as Sarah from our class, stood nearby, looking uncomfortable with the attention. And then something strange happened. Whitmore's gaze drifted across the room, scanning faces, and stopped when it reached me. I saw his expression change, a flicker of recognition that made no sense. We had never met. I was nobody in this crowd, just a mechanic in borrowed khakis and a button-down shirt that had seen better days. But he was definitely looking at me, and something in his eyes looked almost like respect. He excused himself from Jessica mid-sentence, a social slight that would have been devastating from anyone less powerful, and began walking in my direction. The crowd parted for him automatically, and I became suddenly aware of every eye in the room tracking his movement toward me. When he reached me, he extended his hand. "Master Sergeant Nick Mandrell," he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "Valor 1. I have been hoping to meet you for a long time." The world tilted slightly. No one called me that anymore. No one here even knew that name, the call sign I had earned and carried through dozens of classified operations that officially never happened. How I said, and it came out rougher than I intended. "My brother," Whitmore said. "Captain James Whitmore. He served with you in the Stan in 2015. You saved his life during the ambush at Korengal. He talked about you constantly until the day he died. Memories crashed over me like a wave. Jimmy Whitmore, the young officer fresh from OCS who had been assigned to our unit. The ambush that had killed 3 of my men and left Jimmy bleeding out on a mountain trail. The 4-hour firefight to extract our wounded while calling in air support. The medevac flight where I had kept pressure on Jimmy's wounds with my bare hands, screaming at him to stay awake. He did not tell me he had a brother," I said finally. "He never mentioned family." "He was protecting us," Whitmore replied. "Our father had enemies, political enemies, business enemies. Jimmy enlisted under a different name to avoid the target on his back." He dropped his voice even lower. "He told me everything before he passed. The operations, the missions, the men he served with, especially you. The man who carried him 2 miles through hostile territory with a bullet in his own leg. Jimmy died 2 years after that deployment, from complications related to his injuries. I had heard through the grapevine but had not attended the funeral, too wrapped up in my own struggles with transitioning to civilian life. The guilt of that absence hit me fresh, a wound I thought had scarred over. "I am sorry," I said. "He was a good officer, a good man." "He was," Whitmore agreed, "and he would have wanted me to do this in person." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is a job offer, Director of Security Operations for my company. The salary is in the letter, but I can tell you it is significantly more than whatever you are making now." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "You do not know me. I know everything about you, Master Sergeant. I have read every declassified report, talked to everyone who served with you who would talk to me. I know about your wife, your daughter, your current situation. I know you are overqualified for every job you have held since discharge, and I know my brother trusted you with his life, which means I can trust you with my company." I did not know what to say. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, weighted with possibilities I had stopped allowing myself to imagine. Around us, I could feel the room's attention, everyone wondering what the billionaire could possibly be discussing with the mechanic. The irony was not lost on me. Neither was it lost on Jessica, who was watching from across the room with an expression I could not quite read. Before I could respond, the gymnasium doors burst open with a crash that silenced every conversation. 4 men in black tactical gear rushed in, weapons drawn, moving with the coordinated precision of professionals. Behind them, 2 more secured the exits, and suddenly the reunion had become something else entirely. "Everyone down," the lead man shouted. "This is a robbery. Anyone who cooperates walks out of here alive. Anyone who does not, well." He gestured with his weapon, letting the implication hang. Screams erupted. People dropped to the floor, some sobbing, others frozen in shock. Whitmore's security team reached for their weapons, but they were outmatched and outpositioned, taken by surprise in a scenario they had never anticipated. The lead man fired a warning shot into the ceiling, and the sound was deafening in the enclosed space, raining plaster dust down on the cowering crowd. "Last warning. Weapons on the floor. Security complies, or the next shot goes into someone's head." I had already moved. Years of training had taken over before my conscious mind could catch up, my body responding to the threat assessment with mechanical efficiency. I was near the wall, partially concealed by a support pillar, and I had identified 6 hostiles with a quick scan. Their positioning was professional but not military. Private contractors maybe, or organized crime. Either way, they were here for Whitmore. The defense contract he had just landed was worth billions, and kidnapping a billionaire was one way to extract a ransom. I caught Whitmore's eye and shook my head minutely. "Do not resist. Not yet." He understood, dropping to his knees with the others, but I saw him slip the envelope back into his jacket first. Smart. No need to give them additional leverage. The hostiles were securing phones now, collecting them in bags with practiced efficiency. One of them pulled out a tablet, probably jamming cellular signals in the area. They had planned this carefully, chosen a location with limited entry points and high-value targets. But they had made one critical mistake. They had not counted me. I worked my way along the wall, using the chaos as cover. The gymnasium had multiple exit points, including the locker room access that led to an external fire exit. If I could get out, I could flank them. If I could reach my truck, I had equipment that could even the odds. But leaving meant leaving these people unprotected, and one of those people was Derek, who had been kind to me when others were not. One of those people was Sarah Whitmore, who looked terrified and alone. Even Jessica, for all our history, did not deserve whatever these men had planned. I made a decision that would have gotten me court-martialed in any official operation. I stayed. The lead hostile was speaking into a radio, coordinating with someone outside. I counted heartbeats, mapped positions, calculated angles. 3 men near the main entrance, 2 at the secondary exits, 1 circulating through the crowd. The circulating man was collecting valuables now, designer watches and diamond earrings, the accumulated wealth of a class that had done well for itself. When he reached Jessica, she handed over her jewelry with trembling hands, and for a moment I saw her as she really was underneath the polish, just a scared woman trying to survive, just like the rest of us. The man moved on, working his way toward where Whitmore knelt. That was when I saw the opportunity. One of the exit guards had shifted position, creating a blind spot in their coverage. If I could reach the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall behind me, I could create a distraction. In the resulting chaos, I might be able to take down 2, maybe 3 before they regrouped. It was not a good plan. It was barely a plan at all. But sometimes the only options are bad ones, and you choose the bad option that might save lives over the bad option that definitely will not. I reached for the extinguisher, and that was when Mia's face flashed through my mind. My daughter, asleep at my mother's house, waiting for her daddy to come home. If I did this and failed, she would be an orphan. If I did nothing and someone died, I would have to live with that weight forever. Some choices are impossible. You make them anyway. I pulled the extinguisher from its mount, yanked the pin, and aimed at the circulating guard's face from 15 feet away. The foam erupted in a white blast that blinded him instantly, and I was already moving, closing the distance before he could raise his weapon. A strike to the throat, another to the wrist, and his gun was in my hands before he hit the floor. Shots rang out, but I was no longer where I had been standing. I had dropped and rolled, coming up behind an overturned table that provided minimal cover. The gymnasium erupted into chaos, people screaming and scrambling. I dropped 2 more hostiles with precise shots to their legs. Non-lethal but incapacitating, their weapons clattering to the floor as they collapsed. The lead man spun toward me, and I saw the calculation in his eyes. He grabbed the nearest civilian, a woman I did not recognize, and pressed his weapon to her head. "Drop it," he snarled. "Drop it or she dies." I froze, the gun still raised, my finger on the trigger. I had a shot, maybe. A headshot from 20 feet with an unfamiliar weapon and a hostage in the line of fire. The odds were not good, but the look in his eyes told me he was not bluffing. This was not going according to his plan, and scared men with guns made fatal decisions. "Easy," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Nobody else needs to get hurt tonight." "You think I care about hurt? Do you know who sent us? Do you know what is at stake here?" I did not, but I could guess. Defense contracts meant government enemies. Billion-dollar deals meant corporate rivals willing to play dirty. Whatever this was, it was bigger than a simple robbery. "Let her go," I said. "Take me instead. I am the one who shot your people. I am the one you want." He laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You think you are a hero? You think this ends with you making some noble sacrifice? This ends when my employer gets what he wants, and what he wants is Alexander Whitmore. Everyone else is collateral." From behind me, I heard Whitmore's voice. "Then take me. Let everyone else go, and I will cooperate." I wanted to turn, to tell him to shut up, but I could not take my eyes off the gunman. The hostage was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face, and I could see the pulse jumping in her throat. Everything had slowed down the way it always did in combat, each second stretching into an eternity of calculation and consequence. What happened next happened fast. One of Whitmore's security guards, the one I had assumed was out of the fight, launched himself at the gunman from the floor. The distraction lasted barely a second, but a second was all I needed. My shot took the gunman in the shoulder, spinning him away from the hostage. I was across the space before he could recover, driving my knee into his chest and pinning his weapon hand to the floor. The fight went out of him with the air from his lungs, and I secured his weapon and zip-tied his wrists with supplies from my own pocket. Old habits. 3 hostiles remained, but the tide had turned. With their leader down and half their team incapacitated, their tactical advantage had evaporated. They could fight and probably die, or they could surrender and face whatever legal consequences awaited. They chose surrender. Smart. Within minutes, the police arrived, followed by ambulances and a tactical team that was about 20 minutes too late. The gymnasium transformed into a crime scene, witness statements and evidence collection, and the controlled chaos of aftermath. I found myself standing apart from it all, watching the stretchers carry out the wounded and the handcuffs close around the men who had turned a reunion into a nightmare. Whitmore found me near the wall where it had started. He looked shaken but composed, the mask of the billionaire firmly back in place. "That was," he began, and then stopped. He tried again. "That was the most extraordinary thing I have ever witnessed." "Just training," I said. "Muscle memory." He shook his head slowly. "My brother told me you would say that. He told me you would downplay it, make it sound like anyone could have done what you did. But I was there. I saw you." "That was not just training, Master Sergeant. That was something else entirely." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Jessica was being escorted out by paramedics, not injured but in shock, her designer dress torn and her careful makeup streaked with tears. Bradley was beside her, pale and trembling, looking nothing like the confident deal-maker he had pretended to be. She saw me watching and stopped. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, 20 years of history compressed into a single glance. And then she did something I never expected. She walked over. "Nick," she said, and her voice was different now, smaller. "I am sorry." I shook my head. "You do not have to." "No, I do. Not just for tonight, for everything, for how I treated you in high school, for what I said then, for what I was going to say tonight." She wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I spent 20 years convincing myself I made the right choice, that you were the one who failed, who wasted your potential, and then you just saved everyone in this room. What you did tonight," she continued, "that is who you always were. I was just too young and stupid to see it. I wanted someone who looked successful, who had the right job and the right house and the right everything. I didn't understand that real strength does not look like what I thought it looked like. I did not know what to say. This was the apology I had imagined 1,000 times, the vindication I had dreamed of during the hardest nights. But standing here with the weight of what had just happened still pressing down on me, it felt smaller than I had expected, less important. "You were 18, I finally said. "We were both just kids. We did the best we could with what we knew." Jessica nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Your daughter is lucky. I heard you are raising her alone. She is lucky to have a father like you." Then she was gone, guided away by Bradley and the paramedics, and I was left standing in the ruins of a night that had started with dread and ended with something I could not quite name. Whitmore was still there, watching me with that same assessing look. "The job offer stands," he said quietly. "In fact, after tonight, I am more certain than ever. Take some time, think about it, talk to your daughter." "But Nick," he paused, making sure he had my attention, "the world needs people like you in positions where they can make a difference, not hiding in garages, not pretending to be ordinary." I took the envelope this time, not as an answer but as an acknowledgement, a possibility where there had been none before. 3 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of Whitmore Industries, wearing a suit that actually fit, and carrying a briefcase that still felt foreign in my hands. Mia was with me, clutching her notebook and looking around at the soaring architecture with wide eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "this place is huge." "It is," I agreed. "Are you sure you want to work here?" I crouched down to her level, looking into those serious brown eyes. "What do you think, sweetheart? Should I take this job?" She considered the question with the gravity of a 7-year-old facing a major life decision. "Will you still be home for dinner?" "Every night that I can, I promise. And you will still read me stories?" "Every single night, no exceptions." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "Then I think you should do it, Daddy. You are really good at helping people. Maybe here you can help even more people. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. The wisdom of children who have not yet learned to complicate simple truths." The job was everything Whitmore had promised and more. I built a security team from the ground up, recruiting veterans who had struggled with the transition to civilian life the same way I had. We created protocols, training programs, response procedures. We protected not just Whitmore but his employees, his facilities, his global operations, and we did it with the same principles I had learned in the Corps: honor, courage, commitment. Mia thrived in our new life. Better schools, better opportunities, a future that expanded beyond the horizon of our small town. She still documented everything in her notebooks, but now her drawings included the view from our new apartment and the people she met at the company's family events. She even started a junior security club for employees' kids, teaching them observation skills and situational awareness. Her mother would have been proud. I know I was. 6 months after I started, Whitmore invited me to his office for what he called a conversation. When I arrived, I found him standing at the window looking out over the city skyline with an expression I had learned to recognize as contemplation. "You have exceeded every expectation," he said without turning around. "The board is impressed. The shareholders are impressed. Hell, even the DOD is impressed with our security overhaul." I waited, knowing there was more coming. "But that is not why I asked you here." He turned to face me. I asked you here because I want to tell you something I should have said months ago. When I first tracked you down, when I offered you this job, part of me was doing it out of guilt. Guilt for my brother for not being there when he needed me, for building an empire while he was bleeding out in the mountains. You do not owe me anything, I started to say, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. I thought hiring you would somehow balance the scales, would honor Jimmy's memory, would make me feel less like the brother who stayed safe while he went to war. He shook his head slowly. But that is not what happened. What happened is that you showed me something I had forgotten, what being a leader actually means. I frowned, not following. These past 6 months I have watched you build something here. Not just a security team, but a culture. You do not lead by commanding. You lead by example. You remember every employee's name. You know about their families, their struggles, their dreams. You see them. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. My brother used to talk about that. About how you remembered everyone who served under you. How you wrote letters to their families when they fell. How you carried their names with you like a sacred trust. I had to look away, the memories too sharp, too close. I still carry them, I said quietly. I always will. I know, Whitmore replied, and that is what makes you extraordinary. Not the combat skills, not the tactical expertise, the heart, the refusal to treat people as resources to be managed rather than humans to be honored. He walked over to his desk and picked up a document. The board approved this yesterday. Starting next month, you are being promoted to Chief Security Officer. But more than that, we are creating a new initiative, the Valor Program. It was funded and developed by you for veterans transitioning to civilian life. Training, placement, support services, whatever they need. I stared at him, the words not quite computing. Alexander, that is. The scope of something like that. It is what Jimmy would have wanted, Whitmore said simply. It is what you would have wanted if you had the resources. Now you do. The Valor program launched 3 months later. In its first year, we helped 200 veterans find meaningful employment. We provided counseling services, career training, family support. We built a network that extended far beyond Whitmore Industries, partnering with other companies who wanted to do right by the people who had served. I spoke at the launch event, something I never would have imagined doing. Standing at the podium, looking out at the crowd of veterans and their families, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The boy who had enlisted to escape a broken relationship, the Marine who had found purpose in service, the husband who had found love in the most unexpected place, the father who had found his reason for living in a 7-year-old girl with serious eyes and a notebook full of dreams. I thought about Rachel, about the last thing she had said to me before she slipped away. Promise me you will find joy again. Promise me you will teach me that life is worth living. Promise me you will not disappear into the grief. I had made those promises and I had kept them. Not easily, not perfectly, but with the same stubborn determination that had carried me through everything else. And standing here now, I realize something I had not fully understood before. The night of the reunion, when I had chosen to stay and fight rather than escape to safety, I had not just been protecting those people from the gunmen. I had been proving something to myself, that the man I had become was not diminished by the circumstances of my life, that my worth was not determined by my job title or my bank account, that the scared boy who had needed Jessica's approval was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true strength is measured not in what you accumulate but in what you protect. Mia was in the front row at the launch event, her notebook open, documenting everything. When I finished speaking, she ran up to the stage and threw her arms around me, and I heard the crowd's collective sigh at the sight of us. "Daddy," she whispered, "you did really good." "Thanks, sweetheart," I whispered back. "I had a good teacher." She pulled back, her brow furrowed. "Who?" "You," I said. "You taught me that the things worth doing are usually the things that scare us, that showing up matters more than showing off, that love is not about grand gestures but about being present every day, even when it is hard." Her face broke into that smile that reminded me so much of Rachel. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, kiddo." more than anything in the world. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the guests had gone home, I sat on the balcony of our apartment with Mia asleep inside. The city stretched out before me, all lights and possibilities, so different from the small town where I had grown up. So different from the mountains where I had fought and bled and lost brothers who still visited me in dreams. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek, who had become a regular presence in our lives since the reunion. Great speech tonight. Jimmy would have been proud. I smiled, typing back, "Thanks, brother. Could not have done it without you." Another buzz, this time from an unexpected number. "Jessica, I heard about the program. What you are doing is incredible. For what it is worth, I was wrong about everything. You did not waste your potential. You just invested it in things that actually matter." I read the message twice, then put the phone down without responding. Not out of anger or resentment, but because there was nothing left to say. We had made our peace at the reunion, and whatever came next, we would face it as the people we had become, not the children we had been. The stars were visible tonight despite the city lights. Mia had pointed out constellations to me earlier, showing off what she had learned in her new school's astronomy unit. She had inherited my love for the night sky, for the reminder that we are small pieces of something vast and beautiful and ongoing. I thought about all the nights I had spent under these same stars in places where the darkness held danger and the silence hid threats. I thought about the brothers who had stood watch beside me, some gone now, some scattered across the country rebuilding their own lives. I thought about the future I had almost given up on, and the daughter who had given me a reason to keep reaching for it. From inside, I heard Mia stir in her sleep, murmuring something I could not quite make out. I went to her room and stood in the doorway, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, the way her hand still clutched the stuffed elephant she had refused to outgrow. She was everything. She was the reason and the reward. She was the legacy that mattered more than any mission or medal or memory. Sometimes I had learned the most important battles are not the ones you fight with weapons. They are the ones you fight with patience and presence, and the refusal to give up on the people who need you. They are the quiet victories won in bedtime stories and packed lunches and showing up day after day, even when the world makes it hard. "Nick," Rachel's voice said in my memory, the way it sometimes did in moments of stillness. "You are going to be okay. You are going to be more than okay." "I know," I whispered to the empty air. "I finally know." The next morning, Mia and I made pancakes together, the way we did every Saturday. She cracked the eggs while I measured the flour, and we both pretended not to notice the shell fragments that fell into the bowl. "Good enough," I declared, and she giggled. "Daddy, that is what you always say, because it is always true. Good enough is usually better than perfect because good enough actually happens." She considered this with her characteristic seriousness. "Is that what you learned in the Marines?" "That is what I learned everywhere," I said. "The Marines, yes, but also from your mom, from you, from everyone who has ever taught me anything worth knowing. What is the most important thing you learned?" I looked at my daughter, at the future I had almost given up on, at the present I had finally learned to embrace. That it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. That the people who judge you by your circumstances do not define your potential. That every day you wake up is a chance to be better than you were yesterday. I paused, remembering the gymnasium, the gunshots, the moment of choice that had revealed something I had always carried but never fully claimed. And that strength is not about never falling down. It is about getting up every time you do and helping others get up too. Mia nodded solemnly, then grinned. "Can we add chocolate chips to the pancakes?" "Absolutely," I said. "That is the other most important thing I have learned. Never pass up chocolate chips when they are offered." We finished breakfast as the sun climbed higher, painting our kitchen in shades of gold. Outside, the world went on with its beautiful, ordinary chaos. Inside, a single father and his daughter sat together, building a life out of shared moments and stubborn hope. It was not the life I had planned. It was better, it was real, and it was ours.